What's up, you guys? If you're watching this, you are about to watch a pre-recorded video from our Land Scaling Summit 2024. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. You're going to see down below, we actually have a free school community to talk about scaling up your acquisitions. So if you're a land investor that is looking to grow the acquisition side of your business, if you're looking to close more deals, then go ahead, join our free school community. But with that, go ahead and check out this video. Hope you enjoy. Thanks.
So I'm really excited to chat with this gentleman who's coming up, good buddy of mine, who I feel like, again, similar to what we said about Kendall yesterday, kind of made a splash and came in out of nowhere. It seemed like he started in this business after almost everybody in this room, and not that it's a competition, but now he's beating all of us. And it's been incredible watching his journey as he has a background in the military, which we'll dive into, jumped into engineering with ExxonMobil, and now runs a team of 21 staff while he's consistently doing really good flip deals. Right? I think a lot of people doing volume are doing a lot of options, a lot of double closes. Well, this guy's doing lots and lots of flips, all right? And so we played around with the name of this talk here. I think we had, is flipping dead? I think right now it's big teams to big dreams, bunch of different things. But in the least, I think this is going to be valuable for anybody actually looking to scale an operation, have big staff. And so would you please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Justin Piche.
Okay. I'm about to have a good day, no matter what they say. Sun is shining.
Hey everybody, you get to see me again. Oh, I'm feeling a little tired from yesterday. I don't know if anybody else is. You know, Drew was talking about nothing good happens until after 9 p.m. I don't know. I don't know. I think that's partially true, but I think you need to call it at some point. I think I called it a little too late last night.
Kind of classic, though. You come to these events, and it's so hard to stop once you get started, right?
I agree.
Which is a great segue into your career, Justin. So if you guys don't know, again, Justin's background, like I mentioned, this guy spent how long in the Navy?
Like 5 years.
5 years, so half a decade.
Yep.
Half a decade in the Navy, and then jumped into this really, really nice, really well-paying job with ExxonMobil, right?
Yep.
Like a high six-figure job where you were able to provide for your family, because Justin's got 3 mouths to feed, his children and a wife, and is a great family man, big faith guy. But very quickly, he jumped into land. Like it was, 6 months into land that you quit your job?
That's right. Yep.
So tell us about your deal flow. What did that look like where you had the confidence to jump in full force, leaving this very, very nice job that most people would dream of, right? Like most people in the world would dream of having an engineering job with ExxonMobil the way that you did. And you were like, yeah, I'm going to flip land online. This looks good. We're 6 months in.
Yeah, maybe like a little bit of origin. You know, I need to stop and say and give a lot of credit to my wife. I think this is something that, you know, a lot of people who are coming into the land space who want to build a land business, they don't have maybe necessarily the support at home. My wife worked. She worked. So I got to give a lot of credit. She had a great salary as well. We were dual income family. And without that, it would have been a little harder for me to go as hard, as fast as I did. You know, there's a safety net there that I have to say was a huge blessing and a huge advantage, frankly, to be able to scale a business quickly. But to get into deal flow, honestly, man, I just went all in really quickly. I had the benefit of being in the Navy, and when I was in the Navy, I went on a lot of deployments, and when I was going on deployments, I didn't spend any money. Like, I mean, like you can't spend money when you're in a submarine. It's just like, you kind of can if you bring some with you, but like it's no good. Like, what are you gonna do? And my wife also worked for Chevron, and she rotated offshore. So she would be out on a drill rig for 2 weeks, and then she'd come back for 2 weeks, and she didn't spend a lot of money. And so the first kind of 5 years of our marriage, which was incredibly challenging,
we were loaded.
We weren't loaded, but we were able to save quite a bit of money, right? And you know, it came at a cost. The cost was the first 5 years of our marriage, I spent less than 1 year in the same place as my wife over 5 years. I don't know how many, I don't know if you knew that, but it was brutal.
Wow.
And so getting out of the Navy was a really hard decision. It's hard to leave something you're good at. You know, like if you feel like confidence and pride in your work and like you know you're impacting other people in a really positive way, and then to just, anybody can be guilty of this, but like, you know, I can wrap my identity and kind of the value I bring in that role. And so leaving was super challenging. but we did it because we wanted to start a family, moved to Houston. And then, obviously, I moved to Houston right before Hurricane Harvey. So lucky there, I didn't own a house at that time, and so I got to pick the places that didn't flood to buy my house, which was fantastic. And then I got a job at ExxonMobil, which was great. I mean, that was the dream, right? I grew up in Houston, oil and gas. I went to LSU, chemical engineering. It's like, what do? You work for a big oil company. That's kind of how it works, if you have that kind of trajectory. And when I had no kids, it was fantastic. I mean, it was incredible. I had a lot of friends at work. There was no issue if I wanted to stay until 5:30, kind of go get like a drink or something with friends, work friends after work, come home. My wife was there, and we could hang out and stay up as late as we wanted. And there's nobody's waking us up in the morning except for work. And then in 2019, we had my first child, Nora, and everything changed. Everything changed.
Yeah.
And we were both working during that time, and then COVID hit, which everybody has like a crazy COVID story of how it impacted their life. But for me, it was I started working from home, and I lost my commute, and I gotta like have breakfast with my daughter and pick her up from school. I don't know why I'm getting a little emotional up here, but
We love it. We love it, Justin.
yeah, I really just set my priorities. And so I started investing. That's kind of about the time I started investing in real estate. 2019, early 2019, bought a couple of rental houses, bought a big 10-bedroom Airbnb in North Carolina, which is amazing, by the way. I don't know if Brian, where Brian's been there, my sales manager. If you guys haven't met Brian, we work together every day. He's amazing. But I was really looking for like a way to spend more time with my kids and my wife, and I thought, flipping houses, wholesaling, that could be a way to do it. And it's not that I didn't have a lot of success. I had a decent amount of success, but it was like, you do the Burr method, you start to snowball some homes, and you really have to do that at a huge scale to replace a significant income. It's not really a get-rich-quick scheme. It's kind of like a long-term wealth thing. And I'm getting to the deal flow. Okay, so I don't know who in here knows who Kyle Bryant is, but he's a good friend of mine, and he was investing in land from 2019. And so I was asking him, hey, what's going on? What's going on? How are you doing this? We kind of shared tips back and forth for house wholesaling and land. And then he asked me to invest in one of his deals. And I was like, okay, how does this work? And he's like, you give me 16 grand, I'll buy this land, and then we'll split the profits. I was like, well, okay, how long will it take? I'm like talking to my wife, and she's like, I don't know, go ahead, whatever, do it. Like 3 months later, I doubled my money, and I didn't even invest in the land. Or I didn't even buy it. Like, he had title, and I was just like, wow.
So you got 32 back.
Yes.
Wow.
I was like, wow, how is this possible? And that's when I went all in. That was 2021.
Okay.
I was like, oh my gosh. So I asked him, hey, will you be my coach? And at the time, he was working with Clint.
Yep.
Right. That's where I met a lot of guys in here through Learn Land. And he was like, hey man, this is Clint's material. Sure, I could coach you, but you might as well just go through that program. And so I invested in the coaching. I just finished a wholesale flip and made 30 grand, and I took 15 of it, put it into coaching, and yeah, went pretty hard. So, the program back then was it's the one he has for free on YouTube. If you've ever been on Clint Turner's YouTube channel, that's the one I paid like 15 grand for a couple of years ago. It's free now. It's a little outdated, but there's still some good information. I just started researching, and within a week sent mailers, and then within like 3 weeks started negotiating on deals while I was working full time at ExxonMobil.
Wow. And
back then, a mailer would hit, I'd send 10,000, and I get 8 good leads and maybe like 4 contracts out of it.
Yeah.
And so sent a mailer, and literally within 3 months had enough profit or pipeline profit that would have doubled my annual salary at Exxon.
Wow.
And as soon as the first profit was realized, kind of a little thing that went in there is my son was born in September of 2021, so kind of right when I launched the land business. And that was kind of and so it's like my wife went on maternity leave. It was great. She was able to spend a lot of time with our kids, and I was able to see her a lot. And then we were both getting new jobs. She was getting a much more like travel-oriented job at Chevron. I was moving back to the headquarters, be in the office full-time, kind of leave the house at 6:30 type of thing. And we were in a position where we were going to have to hire a nanny to basically wake our kids up, get them to school, pick them up from school or daycare or whatever. And then, somebody else is spending all of the best hours with our children.
Right.
And we yeah, it just was untenable. It was not acceptable.
All right.
And so since the land business had started moving, we made the decision for me to leave Exxon, go all in, and then obviously deal flow gave me the confidence, and then obviously her salary was incredibly helpful to giving us the confidence to make the move.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And it sounds like you took a little bit of a leap of faith, though, right? Because, I mean, it takes a little bit to realize profits. So by the time you left, I'm sure you'd only sold maybe a handful of properties by then.
Yeah, correct.
Right. And so what was that conversation with your wife like when you were like, hey, I think this will work. We're going to leave this really cushy job and dive in because I want to hang out with my daughter, which is great, right?
Yeah.
But doesn't necessarily add a security blanket. So
Yeah.
walk us through that conversation and decision there. Because I know there's some people in the room that haven't left their W-2s yet.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, that's, everybody has to make kind of a calculated risk decision for what they're comfortable with in terms of the security of their income.
Right.
And I think for us, my wife is an incredible woman, and she really just believed in me.
That's so valuable.
And you titled the talk like Big Teams and Big Dreams. I mean, really it was like, we have these life goals, we have this way we want to raise our children and this way we want to live, and we're not going to be able to do it if we're both working at these corporate jobs,
Right.
which are great and a blessing in every way, but they take a lot of time, and we can't do what we want with our time and work these jobs. So something had to change.
That's so valuable, man. That's so valuable. Well, gosh, I don't want us to cry again. So let's fast forward now and start talking a little bit more in the business, because today, I mean, you run one of the larger teams, probably top 3 or 4 in this room, definitely, with 21 on staff, right?
Yeah.
That's big, man. That's big. And I think some people look at that, and there's 2 sides to it, right? Because there's, one day I hope I have a a business as big as Justin. And on the flip side, you got a lot of overhead, man.
That is true.
So let's dive into what that's looked like as you've scaled that up, because there's hiring decisions, there's culture decisions, there's leadership. Why don't we start with your decision to grow the business through staff? Because there's so many different ways you can do it, right? What's that hiring looked like for you historically? Because I feel like it was really just in the past 18 months that you've been growing really aggressively.
Yeah, I think, man, where to even begin here? I think it's, okay, so being in the Navy, I was a submarine officer, if that wasn't clear. And when you report onto your first ship or your first duty command, and you're this, gosh, I was 23, and now I'm in charge of this team of like 30 people, all of whom, maybe except for a few, know more than I do about the ship, know more about their jobs than I will ever know. But I'm in charge. Like, you're the guy who's in charge, but you have no real skill set at that point. And that kind of forces you into, it's really like a trial by fire, right? There's a lot of, and I think my time in the Navy made me realize that the impact that I can have on my team's life is substantial, right? In the Navy, especially on a submarine, when you're in port and you're doing maintenance on this boat, like, you're about to go out to sea. And these people, your men, your women, they're about to leave their families for 4 months and not see anybody. Like, you need to protect their time with their family. And as the leader, as the officer in charge of these folks, my job was to make sure they could spend as much time with their family as possible. So that meant aggressively pursuing their maintenance tasks first and basically breaking down every barrier for them that I possibly could so that they're not stuck on the ship until 11 p.m. because I didn't plan properly for their maintenance, or whatever barrier needed to be done that I was in control of wasn't done, right? There was no opportunity to just rest and sit on your laurels. And I think that mentality has moved into my business, where I recognize my limits, and I have goals, obviously, to achieve, and there's no way for me to do it myself. There's no way for me to do it myself. The only way I can do it is by bringing on talented people and breaking down the barriers for those folks to achieve more.
Justin, I feel like I'm sensing this theme with you that I don't want people here to miss, because I think it's so valuable. If you decide to go down the route of growing a team, you have to really love people. And I don't just mean like socially, I love people, I love hanging out with people, but you have like this deep-rooted philosophy that you want the best for people. Like, I hear you describing protecting your direct reports time to make sure they have time with their families. I know that's something Ben and I fight to do consistently with our staff. We know what's valuable to them, and we want to make sure we can protect that time for them too, and define healthy boundaries, right? Where does that come from for you? I mean, I know that's a bit of a curveball question, but like, was there something in your growing up or something that happened there? Because this is a theme with you, and I think it's so valuable. Where does it come from?
Man, that's a good question, Ajay. He didn't give me the notes before, guys.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. We had to talk. You know, I don't want to like get too much into faith, but it's obviously a central part of my life. And yeah, I was having this conversation yesterday with some folks, and there's a million ways to do this business. I mean, like, there's 100 different ways in this room to do this business, right? And there's often times where I think, man, how much easier would my life be if I kind of scaled the team back and really focused on like the highest profit potential things that we do only, and like that's all we did, and we kind of got really just lean and mean and only went after those highest and best things. But then there's the other side of it, which is I have 50 plus people, including like my employees' spouses and their children that are eating and building up and going to school and building a life for themselves based on what this business is producing. And I have an obligation to those people and all of their families.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I try to lead as kind of like a servant leader. Okay. And I think Jesus is the best model for this. And it really comes from that. I feel like, you know, you can, there's a million ways, you know, one of the best ways to maybe like grow a Christian community is to have kids and raise them in the faith. But I think another way is just to show that servant leadership, that love to your team. And that's kind of what I try to do.
That's incredible, man. That's incredible. And this is so valuable. And I think so many people in this room are aligned, right? This is clearly a big part of your core values. So let's fast forward a bit and talk about your values when it comes to hiring and growing your team, right? Because we're talking about servant leadership. I think that extends when we start talking about in business principles, we have retention, right? Turnover is very, very expensive and time intensive and can be kind of chaotic in the business. I mean, it sucks when you have to fire or when people leave unexpectedly, right? So talk about the culture that you've built on your team so that it's a culture that you enjoy and one filled with people that you want to build lives with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it boils down to your core values. And, you know, Callan was talking about EOS, and that's something that we rolled out and we implement. And it forced me and my leadership team to go through and really think critically about, hey, what are our core values? Like, what are our core values? And then how do we reward and recruit people that exhibit those core values?
Right.
And so, I mean, that's the metric, right? And so when we're hiring new people, that's what we're looking for. And when people are...
Do you know them off the top of your head? Core values?
Oh my God. Yeah, we have 7 of them. Let me pull up my Notion. Where's my phone? Some of the key ones are, there's a couple that are really similar, but some of the key ones are relentless self-improvement.
Okay, relentless self-improvement.
Yep. A bias for action, which I got from Amazon. I worked at Amazon briefly, but that one is the one that resonated with me the most. Brian,
bias
you can
for
help
action, what does that mean for you? Unpack that.
That's a good... Brian, what does that mean for you and the sales team? No, we just had a meeting. The other day to kind of like walk through the team, and Brian was sharing with his sales team like, "Hey, this is what this looks like for you guys." But for me, it means we do things like, and I know it sounds kind of simple, and that's like a really simple way to say it, but it's like I do not. Here's a perfect example in transactions, right? If you have a transaction coordinator, or if you're managing transactions yourself, and you're talking to the seller and the title company and whatever, you can't just send an email. Right? And like forget about it and be like, okay, I'm going to action this task when the email comes back. Because it's not going to come back sometimes, okay? It's not going to come back. And in this business, one of the things one of my key focus metrics is the amount of times we can turn cash in a year. Like how quickly can we get cash back from a deal and put it back to work in the business? So a week delay in transactions could mean a week of whatever. Our earnest money's tied up a week longer because we didn't get things tied up in time. Or on the sales side, it's even more important, right? Because we want to close as soon as possible. So if we're delaying things for some reason because we're waiting on some title company or some surveyor or some soil test or some whatever, that is actively hurting the rest of the team.
Right. Talk to me about the relationship with like mistakes. And what I mean by that is, are they allowed on your team? What does it look like? Unpack some of that and how you've trained your team.
Yeah, I mean, like we're people, right? Like nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect, and we have no expectation of perfect. We have
except for my wife Erin, she's perfect.
Well said, Ben. We have no expectation of perfect, but I would rather somebody. So here's back to bias for action. Like I'd rather somebody try and it be kind of the non-optimum or wrong answer than not do anything at all.
Absolutely.
Like fail quickly, learn, improve, keep going.
I love it. We have the exact same mentality on our team, so much so I'll tell a funny story and brag on one of my staff. It was a Friday evening at, probably 5:30, 6 o'clock my time, and our dispositions manager, Taylor, she's on Eastern time, so it was even an hour later for her. I get either a text message or just a phone call from her, and she was like, hey, I just talked to this buyer lead on a property, and it's a double closing. So, time is even more of the essence on those because you've only got so long in your contract with your seller, so it really matters that you lock somebody up effectively, right? And she's like, hey, I just got off the phone with the seller. He's been out to the property, I think twice at that point, right? Wayne had been to the property twice, and he really likes it. He's really interested in it. But originally, he was going to make an offer with a realtor, but his realtor kind of sucked and ghosted him, and so that's a whole other can of worms. But I talked to him on the phone for 30 minutes just now to try to calm his nerves, and what he was most afraid of was where the actual boundaries for the property was. So I asked him if we put a contingency in the contract so that we would pay for a survey, and he had permission to approve it, and if he didn't approve it, he didn't need to move forward. We could ink it up and get it done tonight. And she was like, am I allowed to do that? I was almost in tears because I was like, abso-freaking-lutely. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Please just make decisions on our behalf. It's that, what'd you call it? Bias for action.
Bias for action.
Right? Rather than, come to me with questions on a Friday night, and God forbid I'm like out on a date night or something and I don't look at it till 8 p.m. and then I just email it over and you don't see it till Saturday morning and you've got weekend trip with your kids and now it's Monday and the buyer's got cold feet. You know what I mean? So that's that bias for action that we love to see in the team, and it's so important we give our team permission to feel comfortable making mistakes so they can lock up buyers on a Friday night.
I think that's a really, really good point. Way to go. Way to go.
Way to go, Taylor.
And that's certainly like the type of ownership. One of the other ones is really just about ownership over each person's role. And like I tell my acquisitions manager, I train, incredible acquisitions manager. Jeez Louise, Erla. If she ever watches this, you're incredible. I'm saying it publicly, but I've said it publicly many times, so she knows that. Kevin can attest. She, at first when you're training a new team member, especially somebody as important as your acquisitions manager, you got to make them think like you. And then eventually you need to give them the power to get things under contract without you. Like you have to have the confidence that they can comp a property 80% right and make the offer and negotiate with the seller and understand which concessions they can make and which they can't. And so that happened pretty quickly for me. I just gave her the power and I was like, look, I trust you. Don't lose more than like $1,000 of my money on a contract. Like don't do more than 1,000 due diligence non-refundable without me looking at it. But other than that, like you have the power. You can offer due diligence. Like you can put 900 non-refundable, but not 1,000. And I just trust her to get these properties under contract because we know like we can look at it in the future. Like there's a million deal killers out there, right? We don't have to know every single one before we get under contract.
Right.
But just that's like one example of a barrier to break down for your team.
That's so good. And it helps with speed.
I think the other thing is that I really drive hard with the team is bringing solutions, right? In the Navy, when you are like, if there's this like communications, I don't want to call it liturgy, but like communications path that you have to have when you're giving or receiving an order. Like you want to repeat it back verbatim, so it's exactly clear to everybody what that order is. That's a lot of words sometimes. Like if I say, hey, Captain, request permission to do this or that evolution, and then he can't just say yes, he has to say, he has to give me the order. He says, Lieutenant Piche, execute this or so action. And that's like words, there's room for mix up. So instead you'd say, hey, Captain, I intend to do this action. And then he says, very well. Or he corrects you, right? It's the same kind of thing in business. Is I want people to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, I don't want to say, hey, I don't want them to come to me and say, hey, boss. And they all say boss. I don't know if your team says boss, but at first it was kind of weird. It felt like I was like, call me Justin. But now it's endearing, and I kind of like it. I know it's a term of endearment. But like, I don't want them to come to me with a problem and say, hey, boss, like, this thing isn't working. Because my first question is going to be like, what have you done about it? Like, what steps have you taken? Like, why isn't it working?
Yeah.
You know? And so instead it's like, hey, this wasn't working earlier, but we reached out to customer support and the feature's now fixed and like now it's working. It's like, great, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for letting me know. That's great. I appreciate that.
I love when problems are solved and I hear about
Yes.
them after the fact. That's always my favorite kind of problem. Well, let's dive into some details in your business, because you and I could talk. Both of us could talk forever, and that's very dangerous as we're up here, because unfortunately we're on a schedule.
Yeah.
And Kaylee's gonna get me in trouble. So let's dive into some specifics on your team.
Yeah.
Right now, again, I know you've got 21 on staff.
We had 3 start this week, guys, so it was 18. It sounds really impressive, but honestly, like, it doesn't feel like that. I know Ajay's saying you have a huge team, and it honestly doesn't feel like that always.
Right, but the reality is you've got 21 on staff, right? And so with that, you're using them well. Can you walk us through what's your deal flow looking like right now? Because I know, again, you're one of the very few people that I know that are just consistently running a flip machine. I can only think of like you, Asia Barnes, Brian McCarthy, JT Olmstead. Like, there's only a handful of people that I know that really do the flips very well still, right? We still get some, of course, but like, you guys run a really good flip machine. You don't do a lot of options or double closings, is how I understand
Yeah,
it.
no,
Like
we've
95% flips, right?
We've never double closed. We did one day kind of like transactional funding close,
Okay.
but we still took title. I still had to wire $100,000 and then get the money back.
So let's define flip. Typically, what percentage are you buying at of your like projected sale price?
Yeah, this is obviously, it's been like a push up over the last several
course.
years, but we're somewhere in the 55 to 60% range.
55 to 60%. Okay, and what's your average margin on a deal typically?
Yeah, 30K or so is probably an average margin per deal.
Okay, and you're probably locking up about how many contracts every single week with your team?
Yeah, we have our KPI is 3 contracts per week, but last week we hit 4.
Okay.
I think this week was 2. You know, it's somewhere around 3 contracts a week.
About 3 weeks, so 10 to 12 a month, pretty consistently, and you might have 2 or 3 drop out in title.
Yeah, somewhere between 20 and 30% will drop out, either because we made a wrong assumption, because obviously I'm empowering my team and like
Right.
some things happen that I see or my sales manager sees as we're going through the deal, and we're like, we can't do that.
Right. So every month you're putting about $300,000 in your pocket, right?
You know, it's so funny. It's so funny.
I told him I was going to say that joke in front of everybody beforehand, so that's not a surprise.
Yeah, maybe can we take a quick step back about like scaling and what it feels like?
That's exactly where I want to go with
so
this.
I've whenever a new investor gets in and kind of is talking to me about how to scale their, or like what they want to do scaling their business, I always tell them like, hey, if you're starting, you're digging a big pit and you're dumping a bunch of money and time into it. Like, that's what you're doing. Like, it's not gonna, you're digging this pit, but at the bottom of that pit is a bunch of wood, and then you get to start building your stairs, right? And you're gonna walk right out of that, and you're just gonna keep going. All right, that's generally, at least that's been my experience. But the whole time, it feels like you're walking on a razor. And on one side is
See a razor?
like a razor or like a thin wire. I don't know. You can use whatever, like a tightrope, maybe a tightrope.
Yeah.
Tightrope is a normal expression. You're walking on a tightrope. Right? A razor would probably cut your feet. So you're walking on a tightrope, and on one side you have to balance your scaling OpEx, right? Because like you can people have done it. Probably in this room, we probably all have some stories of where we put a little bit too much. We've had to take a step back. We've put too much, OpEx has grown too much in excess of our profit. And then we get into a position where we don't have no more levers left in our business. Like, okay, I got to make a decision, and this, I've got to scale it back or whatever it is. And then on the other side, you can grow really slowly and kind of stagnate and like not achieve the goals that you've set.
Right.
So it's like walking that tightrope. I'm still walking that tightrope, frankly. Like it's a very like challenging balance between those two things.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, okay, as we're talking about, you've ideally gotten past the point where you've hit wood, and we built some stairs.
Yeah, we built some stairs.
We built some stairs, right? We got 3 little kids to feed. So in that vein, as you're scaling, I mean, guys, like, this is something that is so valuable because so few people, I think, have achieved this. And, when I say achieved, it's like, obviously, you and I know that doesn't mean it's just, like, done.
Yeah,
right?
it's definitely not done.
And there's always fires, because when you get bigger, there's just more fires, and they're bigger, and they're more painful at times. But I guess if you don't mind me asking, let's talk about your overhead just a little bit. So like payroll, marketing expenses, to get, like, again, people hear, 10 contracts a month at 30K a deal. Sweet, I want that. How much do I need to be spending a month?
Oh man. One thing that I am like really honest with myself about is that I do not run the perfect business, and there's a million ways where I can improve. It's one of the reasons why I love coaching and teaching and talking to other people and coming to events like these.
Yeah.
I mean, Callan dropping some bombs wherever she is. I don't even know. But like, I use AI a lot, but not like Callan does. Got a little sidetracked on my thought train there, but
Talking about overhead and
That's
payroll.
right. Okay. Yeah. So there's obviously ways to reduce it, but yeah, we spend anywhere between $50,000 and $65,000 a month on salaries and software and whatever other things.
$50,000 to $65,000 a month.
Yeah, it just depends. It really depends on how much mail we send. Right? Mail is obviously a
course.
big piece of that.
And is that before you pay yourself?
Yeah, that's before I pay myself.
Wow. Okay. So $50,000 to $65,000 a month, which I can guarantee some people in this room just got a pit in their stomach when they hear that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
That's scary.
You know, I think one of the things, and I've talked to you about this, but one of the things that like makes it maybe easier to spend that much money is understanding your levers in your business.
Yes.
Okay. And
Let's dive into
I think
that.
this is somebody, if you haven't done this, my goodness, you should really think about this, is what are your levers when things don't work out? When you have 3 months of really slow sales and you don't make really any money, and I mean, for me, that's 150 plus K out the door, regardless of whether I sold a property or not.
Right.
You know, unless I want to lay off my staff and like shut things down, which I do not want to do.
Right. Hard to build.
It's hard to build exactly. It's hard to build. What are those levers? And so for me, there's been various points of kind of slowdown, especially in sales, where I had to pull some levers. And for me, the first lever was selling notes on PaperStack. So shout out to PaperStack. But like I had a bunch of notes, and they were producing great cash flow, and I love that as an investment. But we were scaling. We needed capital, right? We needed to make payroll, and we had a bunch of great properties that we wanted to hold on to all the equity in. And so we sold notes and funded properties and kept everything rolling.
How quick was that process? So you said, hey, we sold some notes. Let's get on PaperStack. Talk to me about like the day you listed on PaperStack to like money in the bank account. About how long did that take?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's super dependent on the quality of the note and the property itself. Of
course.
But in my experience, I usually I list notes at a relatively attractive yield. We usually start listing around 18%.
Wow.
It's something that we calculate on our our contract negotiations on the sales side. We say, hey, this is the cash price we want to take. Here's our owner finance take. This is what we have to do to achieve basically an equivalent cash price. And it's really just a calculation. I'm sure I could get more for my notes if I listed them at a lower yield and just was a lot more patient. But that's kind of the process we have. So yeah, maybe a month to a month and a half from the moment I
4 to
list
6
them.
weeks to cash out, and you're still getting cash flow on that while you're waiting, right?
Yeah. I mean, what we usually do is we set like at the contract date. There's an unpaid principal balance, and so that's kind of what we honor. So if the borrower pays us, then we'll end up sending a check to the note buyer afterwards for whatever that amount was.
Okay, I love that. That's great. So lever number 1, selling notes.
Yep.
What are some other levers you've got?
Yeah, exactly. So we, a lot of people. Actually, I'll just tell you, we buy all the properties cash. Before we take title of every property. And when you buy a property cash and you have a large portfolio of inventory, there's value there. Like there's equity in those deals. And so the second lever was finding banking relationships to lend on our current inventory. So we have lots of inventory and lots of money in those deals. And so I can go, if I'm like, okay, I see, and maybe just a quick aside, I don't know if everyone's ever done a 13-week cash flow analysis for their business or have heard of that, but that's a super powerful tool to see where in your business you have cash needs. Like what are the ins and outs over the next quarter, all the money that's coming in, all the money that's going out, and where are there holes in your business? And that's the exercise I like to do. Is I do this 13-week cash flow analysis. I see where in the business, based on projected sales, acquisitions in the pipeline, OpEx, all of that, where are we going to be like a little short, get uncomfortable? Where are we going to be good? And where do I need to pull a lever so that I can sell some extra notes, or I can approach a banking relationship, 6 weeks in advance or 2 months in advance, so that cash is available when I need it. Anyway, just a quick aside.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know you mentioned a very important piece of your business while we're talking about cash is that cash conversion cycle. So we list our properties. We want them to come. I always say I like my money to come home as fast as possible, right? And so what's that looking like in your business right now? I know Dispo's been a little weird this past year.
Yeah, and we have, I want to say we probably don't have the best calculation for it. We have a lot of subdivides, and some of which have been in development for months. Like we're going through the county approval process, but that property's already in inventory. So I'd be lying to you if I said I had a set days on inventory for properties that aren't in development phase, but we're somewhere around like 5 to 6 months average hold time for a property right now. And so one of Brian's deliverables, KPIs for this quarter is average days on inventory under 150.
Okay.
And then next quarter will be under 125, and then next quarter will be under 100, and that's kind of where we want to be. 3 months.
Nice.
Is where
And
we wanna be.
what channels are you guys utilizing then to get that moved?
Oh yeah, everything. I mean everything. We list basically everything with realtors and local brokers. We found that it just helps to have. It really helps to have somebody on the ground. A lot of folks who are buying land just don't really know. And we spend a lot of time listing. They don't know how to look at it. They don't know how to find it. You can give them a Google pin and freaking a drone, like a dash cam video like we do, and like drone overlays and like every which way to Sunday. You can put a sign on the property, and we still have people that are like, I don't know where it is. I'm like, really? Really? There's a driveway. Like, there's a gate. Just go in. I'm not kidding. I like it. Brian has some stories, man. I like it, but
You'll drop a pin, it won't help.
yeah, like
sometimes.
it's similar to the team, right? Like, I want to remove every barrier for my team. I want to remove every barrier for a buyer to buy my land.
Right.
So it's one of the reasons why we do clearing work, right? We put access in on almost every property, because if you're pulling up to a property with your spouse, okay, and maybe you're the one that wants it. You're like, oh, I want this land. Your spouse is like, I don't know. You drive up in the car and you're parked on the side of a county road and you're just staring at some bushes and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know about this. It's like the drone video looked nice. I heard there's a creek on it, but like, how do we get in?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, take down a barrier. It's worth the investment. It really is. It's worth the investment. So MLS, we list on Facebook Marketplace. You know, we're not like, we use my personal Facebook. So if anybody's friends with me on Facebook and you see the properties I post, I'm not posting those. It's my team. If you message me on Facebook like Robert did, it wasn't me responding to you, Robert. You know, my cell phone's on my website probably.
I try to
so.
like every single one that I see of yours.
Thanks, dude. I like yours too. I
No,
like
you
yours
do.
too. But Facebook Marketplace, we did a lot of Facebook ads. I think we stopped mainly because of we don't really like Facebook, but it's kind of a necessary evil. We use lands.com. We have a property listing website, but it's not anything SEO. Like, we don't do pay-per-click. It's not going to rank up there. It's more of a portfolio, you know, to give buyers confidence. Like, oh, look at all these properties they've sold and all this other inventory they have.
Yeah.
We have buyers list. We haven't really done neighbor letters at scale, but we're seeing the value there, and so we're gonna start doing some neighbor letters. But
That's great. So sticking to the fundamentals, man.
yeah,
I love it. Well, Justin, I hate that we're getting towards the end of time here. I want to make sure we've got some time for Q&A. You and I could talk for another 3 hours, I'm sure, because there's so much value. Are there any last nuggets you want to deliver to everybody before we switch over to Q&A while you're thinking?
Yeah. I would encourage everybody to not be a one-trick pony, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. I think when you get leads that come in the door, you want to do whatever you can to monetize those leads. And so getting good and building like the systems to handle a bunch of different types of deals, especially like value add subdivides, being able to do double closes, being able to line up funding so that you can take title to a property. I mean, how many times, I don't know how many people, show of hands, who does double closes a lot? Who's like a real big double close person? Okay. There's quite a few of us in here, or you guys in here. I shouldn't say us because I don't really do that, but there's quite a few of you guys in here. Who of those people that just raised their hand, how many of you guys have had a property, great property, under contract, and failed to find a buyer and had to cancel a contract? But of those, how many of you had a really good investment thesis, and you know if you had more time, you would have been able to sell that property for a profit, right? I mean, if you could have found money, relatively inexpensive money from funding partners that enabled you to take that down. And I'm not talking like a deal funder needs 50% profit. I'm talking about more like a fund kind of partner, 25% return or less. Like, that could be a huge impact for you, right? And so like building funding relationships with people that are happy with relatively conservative returns in the land space, right? They don't need to take 50%. Maybe they're happy with a 20% return. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, friends, family, like old college roommate, like there's a lot of people that are, if you have a track record, and if you've done deals, and they can see that, and you can show that, and you can tell a compelling story, you can show them the investment thesis, you can show them the comps, you can lay it all on the table. They can make the decision. You're not going to force anybody to invest with you, but you'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to take that deal, especially if they're protected by an asset that has a value, right? It's not crypto. I mean, it's not going to go to zero tomorrow. It's not a stock where you have really no control over it. It's all based on the performance of the company and the markets and, you know, who's shorting it and whatnot.
Right.
It's a piece of property that has a fundamental value. Like, there's a bottom to it. There's a limited risk to it. So I mean, I think that's the key, the selling point, at least for investors that invest in my deals, is like, look, there's a limited downside. Your downside is the value of this land, and it's not zero. So you're definitely not going to lose all your money. There's no way that happens.
Right. I love it. I love it. Well, Justin, we ate up into a lot of the Q&A time, so we'll probably just do like 2 to 3 really good questions, guys. So who's got the best questions to ask Justin here?
Okay, couple of questions. You said $60,000 a month, but is that including everything, or is it just the payroll?
That's our that's marketing. That's everything. Marketing, software, data, skip tracing, and payroll.
Okay. By the way, I met him last year, and he taught me something really well about taking down stuff. So in our company now, everything that comes in first, we look at it. Are we going to take it down ourselves? And if we are, you don't put it back in the market.
Treated me to an incredible lunch at a Persian restaurant. It was incredible.
Yeah, so, a lot of good points with it.
Great job.
Thanks, Peter.
How many contacts a month are you doing for outreach for new property leads?
Yeah, good question. So we do a multi-touch marketing campaign. So and I like to start with the cheapest to the most expensive marketing. That's kind of my thing. So mail is relatively expensive. And mail works, it's great, okay, but it costs a lot of money to get mail contracts and mail leads. And so for us, we've done the math, inclusive of salaries, data, everything, all in OpEx cost for texting. It's costing me right now about $2,200 per contract. Cold calling is costing me about $2,500 per contract. And so we hit all of our leads with 3 texts and like 5+ cold calls before we ever even consider sending anyone a mailer. And so what that leads to is it actually leads to much higher mail lead acquisition costs because we're already working those lists over pretty well and pulling out maybe some of the more motivated sellers through those other marketing channels. And so we generally limit mail to subdivide opportunities or like really high value properties, which obviously already have a lower mail yield because those sellers have a whole lot more options than just selling to somebody who's buying their land for cash or whatever. But we are doing, so I have 7 cold callers and 2 full-time texters. We're doing about 6,000 to 7,000 texts a day and about, 14,000 outbound cold call dials per day, but it's about 10% of that are like connections. And of those connections, maybe, I don't even know what percentage is voicemail versus actual connected call, but somewhere in that range. I don't know for a month. You can do the math. 20 days. Multiply that by like 20, 21 days.
So with the cold calling, how many properties a month or a quarter do you think you're getting?
Yeah, it's been about, for the cold callers, it's been about 1 property under contract every like 5 to 6 weeks or so. So usually it's like 4 plus a month through cold calling, 5 a month, something like that.
Great questions, Peter. I'm sorry, guys. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut this off because of time. Again, we could do this all. Justin is here the rest of the day, and he'll be at the gala tonight,
Yep,
right?
I'll be at the gala.
So plenty of time to ask him questions.